This is podcast number 10, and my name is Douglas Grummins. Thank you for joining me tonight. So glad to have you with us. I think this podcast is going to be based on a book I just finished called Fear, Understanding and Acceptance, and the Insecurities of Life by Osho. I think it's important for us to talk about fear because fear is our most basic emotion, and fear in some instances keeps us alive, while in other instances it prohibits us from expanding or growing. On the physical level, fear prohibits us from being adventurous and exploring. And on the emotional level, fear prohibits us from falling in love, or it keeps us from love because of the fear of rejection. And then finally, on the spiritual level, fear keeps us from exploring and understanding the essence of our being, or the essence of godliness. So these are the three basic forms of fear: emotionally, spiritually, and physically. But I mean, you can also feel fear mentally, and mental fears would be like the fear of failing a test, or the fear of not succeeding in life, or our mental fears. But all these fears can be addressed, and the only real way to go beyond fear is not just to accept the fear, but to bring understanding into the fear itself. And this applies to all forms of fear. And all forms of fear can be dropped, and they can be dropped very easily when you come to understand what the real problem is. Is the real problem fear, or is it something that is more psychological, an underlying current that brings the fear to the surface? So you have to adjust what the problem is. And I'd like to share a few words out of this book that I just finished that I was telling you about. It's called Fear, the Understanding and Acceptance of the Insecurities of Life. So Osho shares with us, he says, the other side of life. Fear is the other side of love. If you are in love, fear disappears. If you are not in love, fear arises, tremendous fear. Only lovers are fearless. Only in a deep moment of love is there no fear. In a deep moment of love, existence becomes a home, and you are not a stranger. You are not an outsider, you are accepted. Even by a single human being, you are accepted. Something in the depth opens a flower-like phenomenon in your innermost being. You are accepted by someone, and you are valued. You are not futile. You have a significance, a meaning. So if in your life there is no love, then you will become afraid. Then there will be fear everywhere, because everywhere there are enemies and no friends, and the whole existence seems to be alien. You seem to be accidental, not rooted, not at home. Even a single human being that can give you such deep at-homeness and love, what to say about being in love with the total, with the whole? So fear, in fact, is the absence of love. And if fear is a problem for you, that shows that you are looking at the wrong side. Love should be the problem, not fear. If fear is the problem, that means that you should seek love. If fear is the problem in fact is that you should be more loving. So somebody can be more loving to you. You should be more open to love. But this is the trouble. When you are in fear, you are closed. You start feeling so fearful that you stop moving toward another human being. You'd like to be alone, whether there is somebody you feel nervous because the other looks like an enemy. And if you are so fear obsessed, it is a vicious circle. The absence of love creates fear in you. And now because of fear, you become closed. You become like a closed cell with no windows, because you are afraid anybody can come through the windows, and there are enemies all over. You are afraid to open the door, because when you open the door, anything is possible. So even when love knocks at your door, you don't trust. A man or a woman who is so deeply rooted in fear is always afraid to fall in love, because when the doors of the heart will be open and the other will enter you, and the other is the enemy, says satire, the other is hell. Lovers have known another reality, that the other is heaven. The very paradise satire must be living in is in a deep rooted fear, anguish, and anxiety. And satire has become very influential. In fact, he should be avoided like a disease, a dangerous disease, but he appeals to people because what he is saying many feel the same about in their own lives. And that is the appeal. Depression, sadness, anguish, fear. These are satire's themes, and themes of the whole movement of existentialism. And people feel that these are their problems. When I talk about love, of course, you feel that it is not your problem. Fear is your problem. But I would like to tell you that love is your problem and not fear. It is just like this: a house is dark, and I talk about light, and you say you go on talking about light. It will be better if you talk about darkness, because darkness is our problem. The house is filled with darkness. The light is not our problem. But do you understand what you are saying? If darkness is your problem, talking about darkness won't help. If darkness is your problem, nothing can be done about darkness directly. You cannot throw it out. You cannot push it out. You cannot switch it off. Darkness is an absence. Nothing can be done about it directly. If you have to do anything, you have to do something with the light, not with the darkness. So pay more attention to the light, how to find light, how to create light, how to enkindle a candle in the house, and then suddenly there is no darkness. Remember, love is the problem, never fear. You are looking at the wrong side. For many lives, and you will not be able to solve anything. Always remember, absence should not be made a problem, because nothing can be done about it. Only presence should be made a problem, because then something can be done about it, and it can be solved. It is, if fear is felt, then love is the problem. Become more loving. Take a few steps toward the other, because everybody is in fear, not only you. You wait for somebody to come to you and love you. You can wait forever because the other is also afraid. And people who are afraid become afraid of one thing absolutely, and that is being rejected. So what Osho is saying to us is fear is a negative emotion. It is an absence, and the opposite of absence is to be more loving. And the more loving you can be in life, and the more loving towards life that you have, the less fear there will be in your life. Many years ago, back in 1998, I was on a surf trip in California, and it was probably the greatest surf trip that I ever took in my life, because I fell so much in love with surfing. I mean, I woke up every day and went surfing, and I surfed till dark every day, and this love of surfing is in essence the same as my love for life. Love, in essence, brings in more awareness, and more awareness brings in more light and more understanding, and this deletes any fear. You no longer become afraid of things, and it's so much easier to face things with love in your heart. This is why soldiers who go off to war will actually be coerced into fighting these battles because they love something, whether it's family back home or their country or whatever it is. This love is what motivates our soldiers, and it motivates all of us in a lot of ways. It keeps us sane in most instances. So back to my surf trip in California, the love that I felt for the ocean, for existence, for everything combined, and surfing was what brought it to this climatic moment. And then I meditated the next day after all the surfing that I had done, and I dropped fear. I can't explain it. I mean, I feel like I've been in fear my whole life, in one form or another, always afraid of something and to some extent. But at that moment, I was able to drop my fear. And then I was also once I dropped the fear, I gave up any greed for any future. I didn't care about any future happening to me. I felt like, that climatic moment that this is it. This is the ultimate, life can't get any better than this. Like you say, you're never going to be any older. You're never going to be any younger. You're never going to be in the shape you're in right now. And that's the way I felt at that moment. 20 years have passed since then, and I can say that my life is since that moment has been a continual blossoming, flowering of emotions of love for sharing and caring and giving to all the other human beings that cross my path. So I shed my fear of death back in 1998, and like I said, it has continually changed my life since then. Hear what Osho says back in the book about fear that I was sharing with you. This topic is titled "Afraid to Exhale." Osho says to us, death and life are two polarities of the same energy, of the same phenomenon. The tide and the ebb, the day and the night, the summer and the winter. They are not separate and not opposites, not contrary. They are complementary. Death is not the end of life. In fact, it is the completion of one life, the crescendo of one life, and the climax, the final. And once you know once you know your life and its processes, then you understand what death is. Death is an organic, integral part of life, and it is very friendly to life. Without it, life cannot exist. Life exists because of death. Death gives us the background. Death is, in fact, a process of renewal. And death happens each moment. The moment you breathe in and the moment you breathe out both happen. Breathing in, life happens. Breathing out, death happens. That's why when a child is born, the first thing he does is to breathe in, and life starts. And when an old man or woman is dying, the last thing he or she does is breathe out. Then life departs. Breathing out is death. Breathing in is life. They are like two wheels of a bullock cart. You live by breathing in as much as you live by breathing out. And breathing out is part of breathing in. So you cannot breathe in if you stop breathing out. You cannot live if you stop dying. So what Osho is trying to share with us in this book and in many of his books is that um, the basic fear in life is death. So let me share just a few more paragraphs out of the book. Osho continues on to say, if you look into life, you will be able to know what death is. If you understand what death is, only then are you able to understand what life is. They are organic. Ordinarily, out of fear, we have created a division. We think that life is good and death is bad. We think that life has to be desired and death has to be avoided. We think somehow we have to protect ourselves against death. This absurd idea creates endless miseries in our lives because a person who protects himself against death becomes incapable of living. He is the person who is afraid of exhaling. Then he cannot inhale, and then he is stuck. Then he simply drags. His life is no longer a flow. His life is no longer a river. If you really want to live, you have to be ready to die. Who is afraid of death in you? Is life afraid of death? It is not possible. How can life be afraid of its own integral process? Something else is afraid in you. The ego is afraid in you. Life and death are not opposites. Ego and death are opposites. Life and death are not opposites. Ego and life are opposites. Ego is against both life and death. The ego is afraid to live, and the ego is afraid to die. It is afraid to live because each effort, each step toward life brings death closer. If you live, you are coming closer to dying. The ego is afraid to die, hence it is also afraid to live. The ego simply drags. So Osho shares with us that ego is the main problem and fear is just a byproduct of the ego. Let me share a few more words out of this book. This subject is called Nothing to Lose. There is nothing to fear because we don't have anything to lose. Nobody can rob us. And all that can be robbed is not worth having or not worthwhile. So why fear? Why suspect? Why doubt? These are the real robbers: doubt, suspicion, and fear. They destroy the very possibility of celebration. So while on earth, celebrate the earth. While this moment lasts, enjoy it to the very core. Take all the juice that it can give to you and is ready to give to you. Because of fear, you miss many things. Because of fear, we cannot love or even if we love, it is always half-hearted. It is always so-so. It is always up to a certain extent and not beyond that. We always come to a point beyond which where we are afraid. So we are stuck there. We cannot move deep in friendship because the fear, or because of fear. We cannot be prayerful because of fear. And there are people who go on saying that people pray because of fear. And that's true. Many people pray because of fear, but there is an even greater truth, which is that many people don't go the whole way in prayer because of fear. They may start in fear, but then they don't go very far. They just remain on the formal, cliched level. They say some formal prayer, but they are really not moved, thrilled by it. It is not an ecstasy, excuse me. They are not mad with it. They don't go they don't go headlong. They move very cautiously. And all caution is based in fear. So be conscious, but never be cautious. The distinction is very subtle. Consciousness is not rooted in fear. Caution is rooted in fear. One is cautious so that one may never go wrong, but then one cannot go very far. The very fear will not allow you to investigate new lifestyles, new channels of energy, new directions, new lands. It will not allow you. You will always tread on the same path again and again, shuddering backward and forward, shuddering backward and forward. One becomes like a freight train. Consciousness simply says, be conscious of whatsoever you are doing. Whatever you are doing, remain alert so that you can enjoy it to the very last drop, so nothing is missed. You are alert. Fear is one of the most basic problems to be faced, encountered. So if you feel your fear is growing less, make it even lesser. It is like weeds in a garden. One has to go on continually pulling up and throwing them away. Otherwise, they tend to overrun the whole garden. If you allow the weeds, sooner or later the roses will disappear, flowers will disappear, and there will be weeds all over the garden. One has to go on continually pulling them up. Only then can the garden remain beautiful. When all the roots are uprooted, then there is no problem. You can relax. And it is in that relaxed state that everything actually happens. When we meditate, people meditate in certain postures, and they are very formal about meditation. But there comes a point when you meditated enough that you can, the postures that you're holding, you don't feel them anymore. They actually become part of your being. But you can relax in a chair, and just sit back in a lounge chair and sink into yourself. And like I said, forget about fear, drop fear, and also don't forget to drop greed, greed for any future, greed for another life, greed for all the other things that you feel like that you don't have yet. One has to learn to be satisfied with everything that he has, and all that has been given to him. And it's only at that point that the transformation happens. And when the transformation happens, it is as if you are stepping out of a house. It's as if you are stepping out of a palace, or a very large enclosure that has one door and no light. Everything is dark. And the atheist lives in this existence as well as the theist lives in this existence. To both is the same thing. They are both living in the dark. The atheist has an attitude where they feel that there might be a door, but we don't care about it. There might be an existence outside of the palace, but we don't care about it. We're going to say it doesn't exist. So there's no inquiry, no searching for the door. They just say, no, it doesn't exist. It can't exist. So therefore, we're not going to look. And the theist has a different outlook. The theist says that, well, we'll pass through the door when we die, and that is only partially true. Partially true because when the death of the ego happens, then you step out of the door. The door is realized. You have the key because love is the key. The essence of love opens all doors, and I think these are the most important things that I could share with any audience. But anyway, I wanted to thank you all for joining me and spending this time with me. I look forward to coming back and making another podcast for you. Once again, my name is Douglas Grummins, and I hope that we're less fearful and more open to all that life has to give us. Thank you very much for joining me, and have a wonderful day.